I came back from the hospital, weak and tired, only to find my clothes scattered across the street. A note taped to my front door read, "Don't come back. This is my house. Now." My hands shook as I picked it up. Before I could even process what was happening, my neighbor walked over, leaned in close, and whispered something that made my stomach drop. And minutes later, a police car pulled up to the house. Before I share the full story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment below where you're watching from. My name is Amelia Grant. I am 38 years old, and I've spent most of my life caring for others as a nurse. Long shifts, late nights, and constant exhaustion have been my reality for years, but I never minded. Helping people made me feel proud, even when it meant putting my own needs second. I married my husband Thomas in my 20s. At first, he seemed supportive and charming. He told me he admired my dedication, and for a while I believed we were building a strong life together. But as the years passed, things began to change. Thomas grew distant. He was quick to criticize, slow to show affection. I kept trying to fix things, hoping we could go back to the way it was. But nothing seemed to work. Then my health took a hit. The stress of my job and the tension at home caught up to me. One evening at work, I collapsed. My coworkers rushed me to the hospital, where doctors kept me for several days. They told me I needed rest, care, and support. I thought about home, about my own bed, about Thomas being there for me the way a husband should be. Even though things had been rough, I still believed that deep down, he would step up when I needed him most. When I was finally discharged, I felt fragile but relieved. All I wanted was to go home, take a hot shower, and sleep in my own space. But what I found waiting for me outside my house was nothing I could have ever prepared for. The ride home from the hospital had been quiet. I held my small overnight bag on my lap, picturing myself walking through the front door, slipping into pajamas, and finally getting some rest. But when the taxi pulled up in front of my house, the sight waiting for me made my heart stop. My clothes were scattered across the lawn and even on the street. Shirts, pants, and even my favorite sweater lay dirty in the gutter where passing cars splashed water on them. Next to the pile was a half-empty box filled with shoes, and sitting right on top was a wrinkled note. I climbed out of the car slowly, my legs still weak from days in the hospital, and bent down to pick it up. The words were written in bold black marker, large and sloppy, as if meant to humiliate me. "Don't come back. This is my house now." I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the paper shaking in my hands. For a moment I thought it had to be a mistake, some kind of cruel joke. But when I looked at the house, my house, the curtains were drawn, the door locked, and I could hear faint movement inside. My stomach twisted. Someone was in there, and it wasn't me. I dropped my bag and rushed to the front door, pounding on it with my fist. "Thomas!" I shouted. "Open the door!" "What is going on?" My voice echoed down the street, but no answer came. I hit the door again. "Thomas, it's me!" "Open the door right now." I pressed my ear against the wood and heard muffled voices. A man's low tone, "Thomas." And then, something that made my chest tighten, a woman's laugh. It was faint, but it was there. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The sound of footsteps drew my attention, and I turned to see Mrs. Parker, my elderly neighbor, hurrying across her front yard. Her face was filled with concern as she leaned in close to me. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "Amelia, I didn't want to say anything before, but you deserve to know. While you were in the hospital, Thomas wasn't alone here. He brought another woman into your house. She's been here for days." Her words hit me like a punch. I gripped the railing by the steps, trying to steady myself. My husband hadn't just thrown me out. He had replaced me while I was lying in a hospital bed. My cheeks burned with humiliation, my chest heavy with betrayal. "I'm so sorry, dear," Mrs. Parker added softly. "I kept seeing her car out front. I thought maybe you knew. But now," she glanced at the pile of my clothes on the lawn, shaking her head in disbelief. I felt a surge of anger boiling inside me, pushing past the weakness in my body. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and dialed Thomas's number. It rang once, then clicked. His voice came through flat and cold. "What part of 'don't come back' do you not understand?" "Thomas, what are you talking about?" My voice cracked. "This is my home too. You can't just throw me out like trash." "You left," he snapped. "You went to the hospital and stayed there. That was your choice. This is mine. Don't make a scene. It's over. Find somewhere else to live." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision. The man I had trusted for years, the man I thought would be there for me when I needed him most, had tossed me aside without hesitation. Mrs. Parker touched my arm gently. "You can't let him do this to you. You need to stand up for yourself. You have rights, Amelia. Don't let him scare you into walking away." I looked down at my clothes lying dirty on the street, my life scattered for everyone to see. A couple walking their dog slowed as they passed, whispering while glancing in my direction. The humiliation burned deeper. I wanted to collapse, to give up, but another part of me, the part that had carried me through years of long shifts and endless patience, refused to back down. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand and looked back at the locked door. Inside was the man who had betrayed me, sitting comfortably in the house I had worked so hard to help build. And if Mrs. Parker was right, inside was also the woman he had chosen to replace me with. The paper crumpled in my hand as I clenched it into a fist. My voice was quiet, but steady now. "No, this isn't over. He thinks he can just push me out, but he's about to learn he's not the only one who knows how to fight." Mrs. Parker nodded firmly, standing by my side. "Good girl. You don't walk away. You stand your ground." In that moment, the betrayal was no longer just a wound. It became fuel. I didn't know exactly what I would do yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I was not going to let Thomas erase me from my own life. For several minutes, I stood outside the locked door, numb from shock, clutching that hateful note in my hand. My clothes still littered the yard, my neighbors whispering as they passed, and all I could think was how quickly my life had been turned upside down. But when Mrs. Parker placed her hand gently on my shoulder and said, "Amelia, you don't have to take this," something inside me shifted. Her words echoed in my mind. She was right. I didn't have to let Thomas throw me out like garbage. This house wasn't just his, it was ours. I had worked long shifts for years, saving every extra dollar, helping pay the mortgage, and keeping food on the table. I had a legal right to it, and I had the documents to prove it. I took a shaky breath and straightened my shoulders. For a brief moment, I saw myself the way Thomas wanted me to be. Broken, humiliated, walking away quietly. But that wasn't who I was. I was a nurse who had survived endless nights of exhaustion, heartbreak, and chaos. I was the daughter of a father who always told me, "Keep your papers safe, Amelia. One day, they might save you." And suddenly I realized, this was that day. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I had brought from the hospital. Tucked inside, along with my medical forms, were copies of our mortgage documents, and my name printed right next to his. I held the papers in my hands and whispered, almost to myself, "He can't erase me." "Not with these." Mrs. Parker leaned closer. "Do you have proof you live here?" "Yes," I said firmly, holding up the folder. "I'm on everything. He can't lock me out. not legally. Her face softened into a supportive smile. Then don't waste another minute. Call the police. Let them deal with this. The idea sent a jolt of fear through me. I had never been the type to call the police for personal matters. I hated drawing attention to myself. But as I looked again at my clothes strewn in the dirt, at the door that was now shut to me, I knew this wasn't about pride anymore. This was about my home, my dignity, and my future. My hands still trembled as I dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm and professional. 911, what's your emergency? I swallowed hard. I've been locked out of my own house. My husband has thrown my belongings outside and refuses to let me in. I have proof that I live here. The operator asked me for details, then assured me officers would arrive shortly. When I hung up, a strange sense of relief washed over me. For the first time since I stepped out of that taxi, I felt like I wasn't powerless. Inside the house, I heard muffled voices again. A laugh, then Thomas's voice, low and mocking, though I couldn't make out the words. I pressed my lips together, determined not to let tears fall this time. If he thought I would just crumble, he was wrong. Mrs. Parker stayed beside me, crossing her arms. You're doing the right thing. Don't let him intimidate you. I nodded, gripping the folder tightly. While we waited for the police, I imagined the confrontation ahead. I pictured Thomas trying to twist the story, calling me dramatic, accusing me of exaggerating. He had always been good at turning things around, making me feel like I was in the wrong. But this time, I had something he couldn't argue with. Proof. Every second felt heavy as we stood there. But with each minute that passed, I felt my resolve harden. I wasn't just fighting for a building with 4 walls and a roof. I was fighting for the years I had poured into that home, for the nights I came back from a 12-hour shift and still cooked dinner, for the mornings I paid bills while Thomas complained about money. This house carried my blood, sweat, and sacrifices. He couldn't just toss me out and hand it to someone else. When the faint sound of sirens finally reached the street, I felt my heart race. Blue and red lights reflected off the windows as a police car pulled up in front of the house. For the first time since arriving, I allowed myself to breathe deeply. Help had come. Mrs. Parker squeezed my arm reassuringly. Now he'll see you're not alone in this. I nodded, clutching the folder to my chest as the officers stepped out of the car. The time for humiliation was over. The time for truth was about to begin. The police car pulled up to the curb, its lights flashing red and blue against the pale siding of my house. My stomach churned as 2 officers stepped out. 1 man and 1 woman, both in uniform and calm in their movements. I clutched the folder of documents tight against my chest, like a shield. This was it. This was the moment Thomas would be forced to face the truth. The male officer approached first, his voice steady but firm. Ma'am, can you tell us what's going on here? I swallowed hard. My husband has locked me out of my home. He threw my clothes onto the street, but I'm on the mortgage. This is my house too. I have proof. My voice shook a little, but I stood tall, determined not to crumble. The female officer nodded. All right, we'll need to speak to him as well. Do you know if he's inside? I pointed at the closed door. Yes, he's in there. I heard him. As if on cue, the front door finally creaked open. Thomas stood in the doorway, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression hard and dismissive. Behind him, half hidden in the hallway, was a woman I didn't recognize. She had long dark hair and wore one of his shirts. My stomach turned at the sight. Thomas's eyes flicked to the officers, then to me. Officers, I don't know what she's told you, but my wife left. She abandoned me and this house. She doesn't live here anymore. The audacity of his words made my hands tremble. But before I could speak, the female officer held up a hand. Sir, We need to hear both sides. Do you have proof of what you're saying? He smirked. I don't need proof. Look around. She hasn't been here for days. I've moved on. She needs to stop making a scene. That was when I stepped forward and opened the folder. My hands steadied as I pulled out the mortgage documents. The papers crisp and clear. Officers, here is the truth. My name is right there next to his. I was in the hospital this past week. I didn't abandon anything. I got sick, and while I was gone, he brought another woman into my home and threw me out. The officers examined the paperwork closely. The female officer nodded, her expression serious. Your name is on everything. That means you have every right to be here. Thomas's face flushed. He started to protest. She's exaggerating. She's unstable. But before he could finish, Mrs. Parker stepped forward. Her voice, though elderly, carried a firmness that silenced the street. Officers, I've lived next door for over 20 years. I saw Amelia leave in an ambulance. She was sick, not abandoning him. And while she was gone, this man brought another woman here. We all saw the car parked out front. He's lying. Murmurs spread among the few neighbors who had gathered at their windows or front yards, watching the scene unfold. The other woman behind Thomas shifted uncomfortably, her eyes wide as though she wished she could disappear. The male officer turned back to Thomas, his tone sharper now. Sir, this isn't how this works. Your wife is on the documents. You cannot lock her out of her own home. That's illegal. She has the right to enter. I watched Thomas's jaw tighten. His confident smirk faded into something colder, more desperate. He glanced over his shoulder at the woman inside, then back at me. For a moment I saw the mask slip, revealing the panic underneath. He knew he was cornered. The officer stepped aside and gestured toward me. Ma'am, you can enter your home. If there are any further disputes, they'll need to be handled in court. But right now, you have full right to be here. My heart pounded as I walked past Thomas, my bag still slung over my shoulder, my clothes still scattered in the yard. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. With every step across that threshold, I felt stronger. The house smelled faintly of cologne that wasn't his usual scent, and I saw a pair of shoes by the door that didn't belong to me. The betrayal cut deep, but the victory of reclaiming my space gave me the strength to keep walking. Behind me, the officers spoke firmly to Thomas. Sir, you will not interfere with her entering the home again. If you do, there will be consequences. I caught sight of the woman who had been hiding in the hallway. Her face was pale, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. She avoided my eyes. I didn't need to say a word to her. My presence in that house was enough of a statement. When I reached the living room, I finally set my bag down and took a deep breath. This was my home. And despite everything Thomas had tried to do, I was standing in it again. My knees felt weak, but my spirit was steady. As the officers wrapped up outside, Thomas muttered something under his breath, but I didn't listen. For once, his words didn't matter. The truth had been seen, the lies exposed, and the law had sided with me. Walking through the rooms, I saw traces of betrayal everywhere. Her jacket on the chair, her cup on the counter. But instead of breaking me, it fueled me. This wasn't the end of my story. This was the beginning of reclaiming my life. When the police car finally pulled away and the flashing lights disappeared down the street, I stood in the doorway of my own house, feeling both powerful and shattered at the same time. The house was mine again, but it didn't feel like home. Every corner carried the sour sting of betrayal. A jacket that wasn't mine hung on the back of the chair. Perfume I didn't recognize lingered in the hallway, and a woman's shoes sat neatly by the entryway. They were quiet symbols of everything I hadn't wanted to believe about Thomas. For a moment, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. My heart was still racing, my body still weak from the hospital stay, and my spirit torn between rage and grief. I had won a battle by stepping back inside, but in truth, I knew the war was over in another way. Our marriage was finished. There was no repairing something that had been torn apart so violently, so publicly, and with such cruelty. Mrs. Parker, my neighbor, who had stood by me through every humiliating second outside, poked her head in the door before heading back across the street. "You're stronger than you know, Amelia," she said softly. "Don't forget that. He showed everyone who he really is today. Now it's your turn to show who you are." Her words gave me the kind of comfort I hadn't realized I desperately needed. That night, after gathering my scattered clothes and boxes back into the house, I sat on the couch and stared at the papers still in my hands. The mortgage documents, my proof, my shield. They reminded me that I wasn't powerless, that I had every right to fight for myself. I realized that this wasn't just about reclaiming walls and a roof. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, and my life. Over the next few weeks, I took steps I never imagined myself taking. I called a lawyer and started divorce proceedings. I froze our joint accounts so Thomas couldn't drain them behind my back. I began speaking to a financial advisor about how to protect myself going forward. Every phone call, every meeting was exhausting, but each one was a brick in the wall I was building between myself and the man who had betrayed me. At the same time, I leaned on the small but powerful community around me. Mrs. Parker checked in often, sometimes bringing over a warm meal, or just sitting with me on the porch while I cried. A couple of co-workers stopped by, reminding me that I wasn't alone. For years, I had given so much of myself as a nurse, caring for others without expecting much in return. Now, for the first time, I allowed myself to accept care from others, and it made all the difference. There were nights when the anger tried to consume me. I would replay Thomas's cold voice on the phone, the mocking laugh of the woman inside my house, the sight of my clothes thrown into the street like trash. But slowly, that anger began to fade into something else. Resolve. If he thought he had destroyed me, he was wrong. He had given me a reason to build a new life on my own terms, one that no betrayal could shake. The house became my sanctuary again, but in a different way. I scrubbed every surface, threw out every trace of her, and repainted the bedroom walls. I planted flowers in the front yard, bright and bold, a living reminder that beauty can grow even after devastation. Each change I made was a declaration. This is my space, my life, my future. Looking back now, I see that being thrown out was not the end. It was the beginning. That cruel note, "Don't come back. This is my house now," was meant to erase me. Instead, it lit a fire inside me. I discovered a strength I never knew I had. I realized I didn't need Thomas to survive, and I didn't need his approval to thrive. I only needed the courage to stand my ground. The biggest lesson I learned is that betrayal can strip you bare, but it can also reveal who you really are. I thought I was weak when I stood in the street with my belongings scattered around me, but I was stronger in that moment than I ever had been before. Because I chose not to walk away, I chose to fight. Now, when I come home after a long shift, I unlock the door with steady hands. The house is quiet, peaceful, and fully mine. I may still be healing, but every day I step a little further away from the pain and a little closer to the freedom I've earned. And if someone out there is listening who feels powerless, I want you to know this. You are stronger than you think. Sometimes the worst betrayal can be the first step toward your best life. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too.